Okay, so guys, today we'll be discussing about like how do we exactly execute our test methods based on like depends on okay depends on attribute. So for that, I'm going to create a simple test so that we can see the examples.
Shrikant, are you sharing your screen as I'm not able to see that?
Yeah, I'm just sharing my screen. I'm just opening the Eclipse. Yeah, are you able to see my screen now?
Not yet.
Yes, sir.
It's now
Okay,
able to see.
okay. So what we do is like today we'll be discussing about like how do we exactly execute our test cases depends on like which is depending on the other test cases. Okay. So let me take an example here, the paint, and here so we discussed about like how do we exactly execute groups, and today we'll be discussing about like methods dependency. So methods and groups dependencies. Okay. So for example, here we have test one and test two. Okay. So this test one is like a first method. So it's like if it passes, then only this test two will be executed. Okay. So this we already looked into it, but I want to explain it in detail. Okay. So here also it's kind of like we have some test one, test two. So these are under one group, and test three is like test three and test four are these are under different groups. So here, if you see that these two test cases are passed, okay, which are grouped. So then only the next test case, which are dependent, like test three and test four will be executed. Okay. So otherwise, this group will be failed. Okay. So grouped executed only if in case this group one is passed. Okay. So this we are going to see now. Sorry. So for this, what I'm going to do is like I'll just go and create a class. It's taking some time. So new and a class that I'm going to create here. Depends on method. Example. I'm going to put it here. So here I'm going to type test public void test one. So I'm just using some reflections here. So, okay, reflections, what they do is like they will help you to the for example, if you want to get the method name or if you want to get the test results of this method, so you're going to get with the help of like a reflections method. Okay. So reflective, these are like packages wherein it will help you to configure something which is done before the test executed. Okay, for example, if you want to get the method name, so you have to use the method. If you want to get the results of the text, for example, test of this, I mean to say that method results, so you can get the method results with the help of like iteration. So I'll explain all those things, but for now, I just want to get the method name here. Okay, so for that, I'm going to use this method as like a parameter. See, lang dot reflect. Okay, so here I'm going to get the method name. Get name. Likewise, I'll copy. So it's test2. And here it is like test3. So let me execute this and see. Now it is working as expected, right? So we don't have any failures here. It's working as expected. So this is fine. So I want to put one failure here. So that's nothing but I want to throw some exception. Okay. Throw new exception. Okay. Custom exception. Fail test. So here, so after this, it will not reach, right? So next statement would be terminated. So I'm just writing it as like method. Now go and execute it. So what it says is like here you can see the test2 is failed. Okay, test1, test2, like test1 executed, test3 executed, and test2 is failing. Okay, so it says like failed test2. So now I want to make the dependency like if this test2 is failed, I don't want to execute this test3. Okay, it's kind of like I should have the dependency. So for this, what we have to do is like we have to add an attribute called depends on method. And which method you want to depend on this? So you want to depend on this test2 method. Okay, so let me go and execute this. You see, there is like test2 executed, but it says like failed and test3 skipped. Okay, so why this is skipped is like it's depending on that method which is not passing. Okay, so it says like you can see depends on not successfully finished method. Okay, so test1 executed, test2 failed, and test3 skipped. Okay, so here you can see now the result is like it is skipping. Sorry for this, guys. Now this I want to handle using the test-ng XML file. Okay, here I'm going to create a new file. Otherwise, what you can do is like you can directly convert that file into the XML file. Okay, so here next under this XML, so I want to create like depends on methods.xml. So here simply you can go and create suite. What is the hierarchy? Suite. Inside the suite we have test. So inside the test we have classes. Okay, inside that class we have class. Which class you want to execute? Class name is equals to that you can give it here. I'll take the class name. Okay, so naming is like okay, depends on group O. So we should have given this one. Let me just rename this file name. Okay, so this is not required. Oh, I'm sorry, I just deleted that one. Let me create this one as a new. Under this test.ng XML file, it's going to create XML. Okay, it's not directly creating. Let me just have this file created here. I'll just delete this one. I should have moved it, but I did not. So yeah, new file. Depends on method. I'll try to copy the content from other class. Okay, the other XML file. So let me Control V, and here. So we are going to give Control C. Okay, so when I execute this test, classes test classes, and what is that? It says like same entity. We have same entity here. So this is still showing it as like error. No grammar content. Okay, it's asking me to add this. Last test and suite. So it is looking fine. Let me execute this and see what is error. Oh, I'm sorry. This here it is missing actually. Okay, so it's like this is nothing but a comment. Okay, now you see test one executed. Okay, test two is like it is failed because we have exception, and test three is like it is skipping because of that particular method depends on that failed method. Okay, so this is nothing but you can see this is like we are intentionally failing this one, and we are making this group as like a this method as like it depends on this one. Okay. So now you see that we have like different methods here. So how do we do it is like, for example, we want to like do something kind of like, let us take an example, real-time example, and we try to recreate that one. Okay, so let me just go to one of this. Already we have taken this one as like examples, right? So test one, test two. Okay, so I'm going to copy this, and here I'm going to put it on the different methods. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is like, here we need to extends base class. So if this test case is passing, like, we have this get title. If it is like Google title, then only I'm going to go and enter some data into it. Okay. So here you see what for that, what we can do is like we can use assertions. Okay. Assert dot assert equals if both of them are matching. Okay. So this depends on the method. Depends on method is equals to test one. Okay, so now what we are trying to do is like we are just opening a browser and we are just checking whether the title is equals. Okay, assert equals, then only it will go and execute the next test. Okay, why it has opened this? Okay, maybe there is some issue. Oh, I just closed the Eclipse also. Just let me just. This is taking this many things here. So let me remove this one. Look at browser. We have added the optional. Okay. Now you see that we did not pass the parameter, right? So it is like it is keep on executing that. So I'm going to add the parameters here. So if I don't add, that also should work here because it is we are not taking the XML file. We are taking the parameter and we are returning that, and after that we are getting it. Okay. So let me just go here to this depends on method. And I'll try to execute it. So why should it execute multiple times? Depends on methods, and we have base class, and one time it has to execute it. Okay. So we did not give any parallel execution. Let me check what is that logic that I have written here. So WebDriver, it will return the WebDriver, and the browser should be passed. Okay. So optional. So if you are not passing anything, so what it is doing is like it is taking the edge. Okay. So edge here, it is coming. For every test, it is like before method, it is trying to take this one. So we have three methods there, right? Three methods are there: method 1, method 2, and method 3. Okay. So it's like test. So for that reason, it is trying to open. Okay. So that is working fine as expected. But the thing is like we want to only open one browser for all the three tests. Okay. Let me just change it. So here, instead of writing before method, so I'm going to take it as like before test. So just I'm changing those things here. Before test, after test. Okay. Of before test, after test, what happens is like it will execute only one browser. Like it will open one browser and it will try to test these things. Okay. Now you see, right click and open this one. So we are not setting any parameter. It is taking optional parameter. So that's the reason why it is executing edge. I did it open this browser. So we are trying to open this. So it's checking here. So browser setup, and we are returning this. We should not open two browsers. So that's what I'm checking. Okay, so let's go and try to execute it again. See what's it. There's something, it is like going here, and okay, it will come here and it will take this. So if it is not matching, then it will come here and WebDriver.driver. It will open this. It will maximize and get the return. Equals ignore case, and we should have this browser. Okay. So the problem is like here it is coming and get URL. When it says get URL, so driver.getDriver. So we are getting the driver here, and after that it is doing the assertions and it is like trying to find out. It's quitting that browser. Okay, so let me do one check, guys. So I'll just try to identify that. So why it is doing that? Okay, I'm just trying to debug, and once it is fixed, we can just use that. So before getting into the driver itself, so this test method is like, it's like here, it is invoking the second browser. Okay, so did I write anything before test or before method? It is invoking the browser here. I'm going here and before test. So this is not actual browser actually. So actual browser will open after this. When I say continue, now you can see this one. So it is failing now. So why that is failing? ID is null. Okay, get driver. So quit driver. When I quitting that, so it is like it's not getting the actual driver. So that is the reason why it is throwing the error. Let me try to handle it with this XML file. Okay, so XML file would help us now. So I'm coming here and I'm trying to add this depends on method. Here I'm going to add a parameter. Okay, so this parameter will be supplied to that particular class. Which class it's going to supply? It's going to supply to this base class. Okay, so browser is the name and value is like it's a Chrome browser. Okay, so let's open it in a Chrome. Now right click on this and run as test.ng XML file. It should open Chrome browser. It is opening two browsers. Why is that actually happening? Maybe I'm writing it as like protected D and I've written as like before test. It should open on browser. And here after test, it should execute this one. So have we written anything else from this? So because now it is like before method, it's trying to open a driver. So which is not the as expected one. So parameters have added in before method, before test, I'm just trying to open this. Okay, so let me check this one. So now what we can do is like, I'll try to add browser itself here. So what I will do is like, I'll try to add this code. Okay, so this I'll check it. And there should be a simple issue with that. So I'll take this one, this piece of code here. A few things are added dynamically. So what I will do is like, I'll take this piece of code, guys. So you can just check that one. So here I'm writing it as like driver. So let me add a static web driver. Web driver D. Okay. So D dot driver, and here I'll say the D dot get URL assert D dot get title. And after that, I'm going to use D dot find elements y dot xpath. And here it's like D dot quit. Okay. So you don't have to worry about that one. So let's use this one. So I'm just removing this base class now. So we don't have any dependency. Now it's kind of like, this particular test, whatever we are trying to execute. See, it's like if it is passing, then only we'll go and execute this second one. Okay. If it is failing, then it will not execute the second one. Okay. So we need not give the parameters here. So we'll just remove this. Now we go and run it through the class, or you can run it from the XML file. Okay. We'll try to run it from the XML file. Now you see that it's going to check for the title. Okay. So there's again, it's a failure. So now test 1, test 3. Session ID is null, WebDriver after calling. So what is happening here is the 1, 3, 2. Okay. First it is calling this method and it is calling 3 method. Then it is trying to call the second method. So yesterday we looked into the priority, right? I want to execute the test case in priority. Priority is equal to 1. Here I'm setting the priority. And here I'm going to set the priority. Priority is equals to 2 and comma depends on methods is equals to test. So it will execute in this sequence. Okay. Otherwise, what is happening now? It is taking itself, like, whatever sequence it is trying to execute, it's like by default, it is taking the sequence. But now we have put the priority. Okay. So let's go and try to execute it now. So we should not get any error, get any error now. So it will first execute this, open the browser, enter the URL, then enter the data, then close it. Now it is working fine, right? So now the sequence of execution is like 1, 2, 3. Earlier it was executing 1, 3, 2. Okay, because first it is executing and third it is executing. It's closing the browser. And at that time, that second 2 is nothing but it's like it's trying to find this element, but there is no browser open. So that is the reason it's showing like session ID is null. Okay, so these are the things, guys. Actually, this will happen in the real time also when you have like hundreds of test cases. In that cases, what we do is like we are going to manage them with the help of like a priorities. Otherwise, we are going to keep them like depends on this method. So like in some order, it has to execute. Okay, now it is working fine. Let me take like 1, 2, 3. I'm just taking the title. If this title is failed, then what it does is like this particular test case would be failed, right? So it will not execute this one because we are putting the depends on where the title is not matching. See what is happening now? See, one test case and second test case is skipped because this first test case is not successful. Okay, so this test is not successful. In that case, depends on method, like it's trying to execute that, it's failing. Now it's kind of like if this is failing, I'm just putting the dependency on the other test case also. Depends on test 2. It's nothing but chaining what we say. Okay, so this is dependent on this one is dependent on this one, and this one is dependent on this one. Let me execute now. It will skip the 2 test cases now. The browser will keep on like it will be remain open. See what is happening? It is not closing the browser because it is skipping 2 test cases. You can see. See, first one is like failing assertion, and second one is like depends on the test 1, and say third is like depends on the test 2. Okay, so not successfully finished method. So likewise, we are going to have this test cases. Okay, and we discussed about one test case. Okay, that's nothing but always run. Okay, so here I'm see in this case like I'm not worried about like any other like test cases which are failing, but I want to close the browser. Okay, browser should be definitely closed. In that case, what I'm going to do is like I'm going to put always run is equals to true. Okay, so we'll go to the XML file and try to execute this. Now you observe the behavior. So it will close the browser, though that second test case is failing. See, now it says like third test case is like it is executed. Okay, but second one is not executed. It is like it is dependent on the failed test case. Okay, this one is failing. Okay, it is failing the assertion. Now if I change this one as like Google want to Google, now what it happens is like it will execute all the test cases. Okay, now I want to make the dependency on more dependencies. Now we see all the 3 are working fine, right? So here I'm going to remove this always run is equals to true. I'm just going to add here this particular test case would be dependent on 2 tests, test 1 and test 2. Okay, so this also we can give test 1. If both the test cases are passing, then only this will be executed. Okay, so here I'm going to make it as like 1, 2, 3. Now you see. Otherwise, we can put it as like one Google. Okay. Okay, so here I'll just change it as like Q1, 2, 3. So it will wait for 30 seconds and it's going to fail because you see, first one is passing, second one would be failing. And here, third one, we are making dependency on test 1 and test 2. Okay, so 2 methods. If 2 methods are passing successfully, then only I'm going to close this browser. Otherwise, it will keep on, it will just, open that, it will keep that session open and it will close the program. But browser will be like, it will be like, open. Okay, so depends on method will execute only if that dependent test case is passed. Otherwise, it will skip the test case. It will not fail, but it will skip the test case because the dependent test case is failing. So in that case, it cannot execute the test case. Okay. Again, go and see. See, first one is like passing and second one is failing because no such element exception because this element is not available. And third one is skipping. It says like depends on this particular method. See which method it is showing like 2 and 1. Okay. So this both of them are like one is passing, another one is failing. But in this case, like it is going to consider two test cases. If these two test cases are passing, then only it will execute this. It's kind of like an AND condition. Okay. For example, I want to skip the first test case. Okay. This test one, like, test two, I want to skip. Test one is working fine. Test two is like, I want to skip. So in that case, what I can do is like, I can just add a method called ignore missing dependencies is equals to true. Okay. In certain cases, now you see, when this works is like, see, now I'm going to add one more test case called test 3. Okay. Test 3 is there. I'll just add it here. I'm going to set the priority 3. Okay, we have, sorry, test 3 is already there, right? So I'll take test underscore. I'll make this one 3 and this one 4, okay? Because we have two test cases which are. Now you see that these two test cases are working fine, okay? 1 and 2 are working fine. But there is a third test case, I'm adding dependency here, okay? Third test case also, I'm adding the dependency, test 3. Okay, I'm adding one more tag. Okay, let me just remove this one and I'll show you like how do we exactly use it. Okay, so let me just first execute this test case. So test 1, now this is dependent on test 2. Okay, if test 2 passes, then it should execute this one. And test 1 to 3 passing, then only I want to close this browser. Okay, otherwise it will be remain open. So what is the priority? 1, 2, 3 and 4 priority. Okay, so priority we need to change. In this sequence we want to execute. Now, anyways, like when we enter this, so it will not find that particular object. Okay, so let me see, observe carefully. So what will happen in this case is like test 1, test 2. See, I'm making dependence here and final dependency is like now it is like kind of it is entering the data, but it is closing. Okay, but it is closing. Let's see that what is happening here. Test 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, it is finding that particular method and it is entering. So here what I'm going to do is like I'll add invalid selector. Okay, so now observe. 1, 2, 3, 4 test cases. 1 is dependent, like 2 is dependent on 1 and 3 is dependent on 2 and 4 is dependent on 1, 2, 3. All 3 test cases. It's like it's trying to find that search element, but it is not there. Okay, because of the invalid identifier. It wait for 30 seconds and it will throw the exception. But this test case is failing and this will not close the browser because test 1, 2, 3. Okay, 3 is failing in this case. So it will not close the browser. It will stop the execution. It is waiting for that particular test case to be executed, and if it's not passing, then it's going to skip this execution. Now you see what is happening here. So test 3 is failing and test 4 is skipping. So we have this test browser session is on. Okay. Now I want to I don't want to care about the test cases which are not there. Okay, which are not there. In this case, few test cases would be skipped. Okay, few test cases would be skipped or few test cases would be deleted or few test cases are ignored. For example, here I'm going to add one more tag. Okay, so observe carefully. I'm going to add one more tag called skip. Here I'm going to add a tag called throw new, skip execution. Okay. So skip exception. Okay. This skipped. So it will not reach till the end. So this test case is skipped. Okay. Now what is happening is like this particular test case where I want to close the browser is dependent on test 1, test 2, and test 3. But test 3 is skipped. Okay. Test 3, I don't want to execute. I just return like, skip, throw exception or 3, like, I'm just throwing in if skip exception. So in this case, this skip exception is like part of test ng. Okay. What it does is like, it will skip this particular test case. Okay. So it will throw like, this test case is skipped. So now you see there is a 3 which is dependent, but I don't want to like, depend on this skipped cases or deleted test. Okay. So in that case, what I'm going to do is like, I'm going to add a tag called ignore missing dependencies is equals to true. When I say this tag, so it will ignore those missing dependencies and deleted test cases. For example, if we have a test case called some test 4. Okay, let's look into this test 3 and we'll see the test 4 also. I'll add one more, one more test which is not available. Now what it does is like, it will execute first test case, second test case, and third test case is like skipped so that it will skip it. Now what it does is like, it will close the browser because we have added that particular skip test case. It should close it actually. Depends on test 1, test 2. Okay, let me just remove this one. So if I add this, any of this dependencies, so it should be executed. Test 1 and test 2, and this is like depends on test 1 to 3. Test 3. So what it says here, so one instance depends on successfully finished method. So have we given this one? So we are given the proper, and we are skipping this. So it will say that it is skipped. So here we are adding the dependencies. So if we are adding this dependency, then it should definitely ignore the test case. So it simply says here, you can see the notation of this. So what it does is like, see, ignores missing dependencies. Okay. If set to true, this test will run even if the methods depends are missing or excluded. Okay. Maybe like it's not accepting the skip. Let me just do one thing. I'll just comment this. Okay. So then we'll execute. So it should allow for the skipped also, but there could be a latest change in that. Let me just execute now. Because I'm just, I don't have this test case, okay, which is like, I'm just putting as like test 3. So when I comment this is not available as part of execution. Let me go and execute this one. So now it should go and execute the test case. Like, it should close the browser. See, now it is working. Maybe that skipped is excluded in this. So in certain cases, what happens is like, if you want to exclude this, you can exclude from the test case here. Okay. So that's nothing, but you can just go here and try to add a tag called methods, and you can just write it here. For example, if you're writing exclude, name is equals to, so what is that? Test 3. And after this, what we have to do is like, we have to add the class, end of the class. So go here and remove this one. Now go and execute this one. So here, I'll just remove this tag, but I want to exclude that test. Okay. So, but here you can see we have a dependency. But we are again adding one more tag is like ignore the skip test cases. That's nothing but deleted or ignore test cases. So I'm just excluding it. See, now it is closing. Okay. So we have excluded this. So this is one way, like, we have deleted the test case and we have excluded the test case. The other one would be like, other example would be like, now here, I'll completely remove this test case. Okay. So control S. Now we see we don't have any test here, but here I'm trying to execute that. One is like excluded, another one is like deleted, another one is like ignore, it says. Okay, the skip it is not accepting. See, now this is also working fine. And I'll just do the Control Z. Now I'm going to use a tag called ignore. We already looked into it, right? So why do we use ignore? If you want to ignore this particular test, okay? So change it to ignore. Yeah. Now it should work as expected. Okay. See how this depends on method should work here. See, how do we exactly handle these things? So I showed you all 4 types of things that we can handle with the help of like depends on method along with the ignoring those test cases. Like if any, for example, down the line, you're creating a number of test cases, and this is like, kind of test we want to close the browser. If some test cases are not, in some test cases are not working as expected. So in that case, what we do, we want to close the browser. So what we do is like, we are going to put depends on method along with this. We are going to put some ignore methods. See, for example, we are trying to delete or exclude, or if that test case is not covered as part of our, like, see, for example, I'm deleting it. Now the test case is not available, but still we are putting depends on method. Okay. So in this case, if I don't put this tag or property here, so what happens is like, it will not execute itself. It will say that here itself, it will throw the error. See, beginning itself, it will throw the error because it says like it depends on non-existing method test 3. Okay. Non-existing method test 3. For example, if I'm putting it here, I'll just try to remove this, remove it again. Now I'm putting ignore. Okay. Right click and run as test engine. Now what it is saying, see, is depending on method public void throws which is not annotated test are not included. Okay. So this is one exception. Another one is like, if go and add this one as like excluded. So whatever we have excluded here, I'm just going to put it here and right click, go here and right click and run as test engine. See, it is not allowing itself here. Okay. So it not even opening the first test case, which is not annotated test and not included. Okay. So to ignore all these things, what we do is like, we are going to add a simple property as like ignore missing dependencies. Now right click and run as C. I've set it here excluded, and here I have put it as like ignore, and I'm trying to execute now. It will go and read that property. Okay. So now it's like you need not to depend on that particular test case, which is like ignored. Okay. So now you can see skipped is not working here. I thought like it can skip this exception, but you see that I'm just removing this one. I'm removing this. Skip should also work, but maybe like I need to check the documentation why it is not working. Okay. So here I'm removing this. I'm putting that skip exception here. Otherwise, we can add the skip exception here also. Like we can add skip failed invocation, not failed invocation. Let me add this tag here and I'll try to execute this. Yeah, in this case, I think it is skipping, but yeah, here we have added like, skip failed invocation. So this is like another tag that what it is like, if it particular test case is not executed within the given invocation, like we have timeouts and we have like, invocation counts. So in that case, if it's something is failing, so it is like it will skip. But here it is accepting the skip fail invocations. But in this case, like I'm trying to throw the exception here. Okay, so skip exception, it is not accepting this one. But what are the things that we have covered as part of this ignore missing dependencies is like in 3 cases, it will ignore those. Okay. One is like test case is deleted. And if test case is ignored, and other case is like if it is excluded. Okay. So this will work in conjunction of depends on methods. Okay. This will work in conjunction of depends on methods. Depends on this method, but if some method is like deleted or it's excluded or it's ignored, in that case, we have to add this tag. Okay. So let me just add another one. So it is all like, kinds of, again, if the always run is equals to, if I write always run is equals to true, then if I remove this, let's see what happens. So here I've excluded that particular test case. Okay. So here I'm going to exclude that particular test case. I'll remove this one also. I'm throwing the new exception. Okay. So let's go and execute it now. I did not add the tag, ignore missing dependencies. Well, what it is doing now? So it is considering that execution because we are making the dependency, but we have written always run is equals to true. In that case, if this particular test case is like, excluded, though it is excluded, it will work. Okay. So it's all depends on our requirements. If you want to ignore missing dependencies, like for example, if this test case is not there. Okay. So let me go and execute this one. So we have to remove this include method, which is like anyways, it will exclude and it will run rest of the test cases, but the test case is not available yet. What is happening? So we have put the flag as like always run is equals to true. That is the reason it is executing. Okay, it is considering this tag first before considering this depends on methods. Okay, so this is how we'll be working on the depends on methods. Okay, depends on method is like this particular method is dependent on the some other method. Only this will execute if it is passing. If you want to ignore them, like any other methods which are like deleted, excluded, or ignored, you can add the tag ignore missing dependencies. Okay, so that's nothing but we have a tag here. Ignore missing dependencies is equals to true, and you can add if you want to all run that particular test case always irrespective of your dependence test cases. Okay, so this we can add the tags here. Okay, this is all about like depends on methods. Are you clear with this, guys? How do we exactly use it?
Yes.
So yeah, so guys, please practice this. This is very important because now you can remember, but when you are using it, see there are a lot of things which will come as part of this TestNG along with the Selenium. Okay, so we have to remember all these things. Okay, so why do we use this? Why do we use this? When do we use this? And what is our requirement? So all these things that we have to remember. Okay, so let me go ahead with the other scenarios. So this is for the depends on method. So now I'll be creating another class for depends on groups. Depends on groups. I'll take the same example. So that we can save our time instead of writing all these things. So I'll take it from here. So I'm going to group it. Okay. So how do we add the groups? This login. See here I'm putting it as like search. So I'm going to add two more things, search. So test 1, this is test 3, and this is test 4. And here I'm going to add it as like test 5. Okay. So, okay, control Z test 5. So here I'll change the priority, priority 1, priority 2, priority 3. And here I'm going to put the priority 4. And here I'm going to put the priority 5. Okay. So first time it will search for automation testing, and next it will search for robot testing, and it will search for security testing. Okay. So security testing. So here I've added this as like, groups. One is like search login. Next is like search. And after that, I'm going to add this one as like, let me just remove this one and I'm going to add it as like close browser. Okay, just I'm grouping them. So I'll repeat, remove this depends and all. So we are going to exclusively talk about groups. Now it's like, you see, if this particular thing is passing, then only this group should be executed. In that case, what we do is like, we are going to add the depends group is equals to on which group you want to depend is like, we want to depend on this login group. Okay. So now it's like we are putting, okay, let me put it as search 1, search 2, and search 3. Okay. So 3 different groups. And if it is working fine, then it should execute this particular groups. This is nothing but search 1. Okay, let's execute this one. Okay, so now you see you have group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4, and group 5. Okay, all 5 groups are there. So for this, what I'm going to do is like I'm going to create XML file. Okay, so just I'll drag and drop this one. Control C, Control V. Here I'm going to add depends on groups. Okay, how do we add this now? How do we execute the groups? See, if I try to execute like this, then what happens is like it will directly go and execute it. But now it's kind of like we have to add the dependency to the groups. Okay, so where do we add it? So we can add it. So groups can be executed. Where do we can execute the groups? Groups can be executed at the test level. So I'll just add it as like groups. And inside that, we can add it as like run. Inside that, you want to include name is equals to, what is that? Login. Okay, let me add, we have only one test. So I'll be adding it under the test here. Okay, we can execute them in suite also. See, now I'm not putting I'm not putting anything like, I'm just putting as like login. Okay, so which groups you want to execute is like login. If login executes, then it will execute the search. Okay, so if search executes, then it's going to execute the next. Let me add all the dependencies here. Okay, one after the other. Okay, so it's kind of like a chaining. Login depends on search 1, depends on login, search 2 depends on search 1, search 3 depends on search 2, search and close browser depends on search 3. Okay, let me go and execute this program and see what is the output. So what is happening in this case? So it is like only considering one test, right? So you see here, it's only executing test 1 because you have defined it in way like, include only this particular test. Okay, let me include all of them. So here we have search 1, search 2, search 3. And finally, we have close browser. Control S. Okay. So now we go and try to execute this. Now we'll see what happens in this case. Login, search 1, search 2, and search 3, close browser. Sorry guys, it's opened here. Okay, all 5 cases are passing here. Okay, so now I just want to clean it up. After entering that, I want to clean it. Okay, so for this, what I can do is like, we are inserting this. Okay, let it be like that. Otherwise, I have to add additional code that is not required for us now. So now you see that search 1, like everything is passing, right? If this is working, this will execute. If this is working, this will execute. Okay, likewise, it is working fine. Now I have here I'm putting 1, 2. Okay, so search 2. Search 2 is like it is in the group of search 1. Okay. Sorry, it is search 2 is a group and it depends on the search 1. But here, when you see the search 3, it depends on the search 2. If this is failing, this should not execute this one. Okay. If this is not working, if it is skipped, it cannot execute this one. Okay. So let's go and try to execute this. Now we'll see that if here we are including it. Okay. But we'll see that what exactly happens in this case. Because we have put the dependencies, right? We have put the dependencies on the group. If groups are not working as expected, then it should fail. This is one way of setting the groups, and we have another way also. I'll show you. Now you see, he did not enter robo, and after that, he did not enter any security testing. It's not even close. Let's wait for some second because we are waiting for that element to be available. But implicit wait is applied on that. Okay, let's go and see what is that output. Still, it is trying to execute this one. I've given the dependencies also, which groups you want to include. It is executing this one. Now you see what is happening here. 2 passes, 1 failure and 2 skips. Okay, it's like third one is failing. Okay, fourth one will not execute because it is depending on the group which is not finished. Okay, so here also it will not execute because this is dependent on the search 3 groups. Okay, so this is one way of doing it. Okay, so one way of putting all these things. But here you can see that how do we put it? So we are putting everything include and we are putting dependencies also here. But it's like it's not my requirement. I don't want to put here depends on cases. So then what I can do is like I can go to this XML file. Okay, so instead of run, I'm going to put the dependencies. Okay, so inside these dependencies, I'm going to add it. So how do I add it? As like group name. Group name is equals to search 1. Here I'm going to add depends on is a keyword called depends on the method login. If login is passed, then I can execute this particular test. Okay. So likewise, what are the group dependencies we are going to add? It is like, so I'll remove this one. I'll remove the run also. I'll just add these things here. Search 1 depends on, like search 2 depends on search 1. And search 3 depends on search 2. It's kind of like a chaining here also. And I'm sorry. Close browser What is that group that we have here? Close browser. It depends on this group. Sorry, guys. Yeah. See, login, like search one is depends on login, and search two is depends on search one, search three is depends on search two, and close browser is depends on search three. Okay. So here we need not to write these dependencies now. We can remove this one. Okay. So this dependencies, adding it class level is not required now. Okay. We'll try to execute it first in a positive way, that we'll see that how exactly this will be executed. Okay. Run as. I close this one. Automation testing, then robot testing, then it will enter security testing and it will close the browser. Okay, now you see it is working as expected. All 5 cases which are like dependent, these are working as expected. Okay, so one is like you can use the run and you can include those test cases to be executed, and you can add the depends on groups here. The other one is like directly you can add this like depends on. This would be easy for us. Okay, so we can add the dependencies here. In this case, like an XML file, it would be easy for us because we can add the dependencies. So there it would be like kind of clumsy here. So we need to check go to each and every test, then we have to configure it. But now you see, if this test case is failing, then what happens? Search2 is not working. Okay, so in this case, group name search3 and close browser should not execute. Now it is trying to find that element, but that element will not be available. It will throw the exception. And after that, rest of the test cases would be skipped, which are part of the different groups. It has taken 30 seconds. I'm just waiting for that. Now you see. 2 are passing and this one is fail and 4th, 5th are skipped. It is as we got the output as like we were doing it this class level, right? So it was like giving the same output. So it's like we are configuring as part of like groups now. So we are trying to make the dependencies. Okay, so how do we add the dependencies here? So we are going to add the dependencies like this. Okay, so here within this we can again, if you want to add like run include, that that's like a normal thing. But if you want to make the dependencies of the groups, so in this case we have to use this one. Okay. So with this we have covered depends on methods and depends on groups. Depends on method is like quite easy for us, but depends on group is like we have to group them and we have to execute them. Okay, for example, you can put all of them as like part of search to make it easy. So here you can see, you can remove these things. The searches depend on this login. Like it's all depends on our requirement actually. How do you want to group them? So now if you go and execute this one, in this case, let's see. If for example we have 1, 2, 3, We are not writing anything, depends on. So it will try to execute each and every test case because we did not put anything and we are trying to execute from the class level. So what is happening in this case? It is trying to identify this element, but finally, based on the priority, it will execute this, like it will close the browser. Now you see, it closed the browser. The test, which is like 3, 4, 5 are showing as like passed because we have those test cases. Like we have those IDs passed perfectly. But now when you run it from the XML file, now it will show you like it is skipping those test cases. Now we go ahead and wait for some time here. Now you see what is happening here. No such element available, and test3 it is saying like passed. Okay, but it's like, see what is happening here. Test3, test4 are passing because those are like depends on the group's login. Okay, so search method is like it will go and see this one is failing. It may skip this one, but here you see that these two test cases are dependent on this like search login method, right? So this will be executed as part of that group. But here close method is like it depends on this search. If search is not perfectly executed, all the test cases are not executed here under this search group. So it is skipping. So it will say that one of this group is not like finished. Methods in that group search is not working as expected. So it will show that example, like wherever we are getting the exception, that exception shall be shown here. Okay, this is the exception, fail exception. It will show and it will not close the browser. Okay, so this is like depends on groups. So we looked into them like two things. One is like we can set it class level and we can manage to execute under that particular group. So another thing is like you can run and you can add the meta groups also. How do we add those meta groups here? So in this case, if you want to add is like this is like search group and this is like login group, you want to execute them. So how do we do it? So we have to add it as like a meta group. How do we define them? So here we have to define them. So we can define name is equals to all test. Inside that you can all tests include name is equals to login, and here include name is equals to search, and include name is equals to close browser. So under this define itself, we have defined it. We can run. Include name is equals to all test. So, but here you have to go and add this tag. What is the tag that we have to add here is like, we have to add depends on group is equals to login. So this is like another way that we can go and execute. See, now what I'm doing is like, I'm just defining those test cases as like login search all these groups as like, one meta group, and I'm trying to run that meta group. Let's go and run it. So whichever way we want, we can execute it. We can run it. Okay. So I'm just showing like multiple ways. How do we exactly configure this? Now you see that all of them are working fine. Now this way also we can execute. So how do we do it? So we are defining it as like a one group, and I'm trying to execute it. Okay. For example, if something is not working as expected, let us take like 1, 2. So go here and try to run it. So security testing, we have issue with this security testing. That's nothing but this may not identify this element. Okay, it will not can't enter the security testing. And what it does here, it will wait. It is waiting for that particular element. So now it is failing and it is keeping this. Okay, so you can do it from the class also, because we have given the depends on method. So this is all like, you can run it from the class. You can run it from the XML file. This is like another way of adding that one. Okay, so I'll just undo this. We'll keep that dependencies. How do we exactly run with the help of this dependencies? Okay, search one, search. So here also I'm going to remove this. Okay, so this is like search and this is like search. Now you see this looks clean now because we are not adding any depends on groups, but here we are adding those depends on groups. Okay, so we can include them, we can define them as like meta groups, we can run it, and we can add the dependencies here and run it. We can add the dependencies there in XML file also, the other possibility. Okay. Today I'll stop it here, guys. So tomorrow we'll be discussing about like parallel execution of test. How do we execute in different browsers? Cross browser testing. Okay, cross browser testing and parallel testing. Cross browser testing is like we can execute same set of test cases in Chrome, Firefox, or Edge. That is cross browser testing. And parallel execution is like within the same browser if you want to execute different test cases. Okay, so that is parallel execution. So tomorrow we'll be discussing about these things, and probably tomorrow I'll start the data provider also. I'll explain the data provider, then we'll be done with this test ng. And yeah, I mean, still we have like listeners are there. So listeners and retry analyzers, how do we use that listeners and all? So after that, we'll try to design a small framework for the data driven testing. After that, we'll be designing a hybrid framework with the help of like log4j, and I'll create Maven project, and after that we'll add this extend files log4j grid database testing. Then after we'll be executing all the test cases at once. Like I'll show one example with that. So we'll be done with this complete now course. Okay. Yeah, Devi, you have some questions for me, right? So we can connect now. Do you have any questions? Other questions, guys? I mean, like from Southern Utkarsha. Okay, okay. Sure, guys, please practice. This is very important, and you can go through the videos again and again, and you can try to connect it. Okay, few things are like, it will change based on the versions of Selenium and based on the versions of TestNG.
because we are not using any standard versions. Okay, so it will be like, market wherever it's all like open source tools. That is the reason why we have a lot of demand and a lot of changes will be coming as part of like versions. Okay, so that will be like small changes, so you need not to worry about it. But major things would if it changes major things, then we have to have the documentation. And I suggest you to go through this documentation, guys. This is like clearly given how do we exactly add those things and how do we exactly execute test cases based on our requirements. Okay, so to have some heads up, we have a data provider also. You can look into the data provider and parallel execution also. And after that, we can discuss in detail.
Okay.
Okay, so here is what we have discussed today, like group name dependencies, group name. C depends on A, B, and Z depends on C. Okay, so this is what we have discussed. So nothing that I'm not missing out anything which is not there in the documentation, and everything that whatever we are discussing will be there in the documentation. Okay. Okay, guys, thanks for your time. Devi, you can stay on, and rest of the folks you can just drop.
Yes, sir, I'm sharing my screen.
Okay. Let me, okay, I'll just stop this.